everyone, it's Teresa and welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be me talking about the books that I read in the month of December. This will wrap up not only my general December TBR, but also my Queer Lit TBR. So, if you guys have been waiting for that one, it's coming. Before I get into the video, I have no idea what I'm going to say for these book reviews. I have the ratings and I remember vaguely of what I thought about them. I got sick at the beginning of the month, so I couldn't really write anything down, and then I lost the journal where I kept all my thoughts. I found it like last night, but that doesn't help me for literally this video. So wish me luck, and we're just gonna get into it. We're just gonna go with our Queer Lit wrap up first. So the first book that I read for Queer Lit TBR is actually a graphic novel, and that is Heavy Vinyl Volume 1 by Carly Usdin, and then the illustrator is Nina Vakueva. This is essentially a Fight Club meets queer girls in the 90s. That's all I can really say. I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars. I thought the writing was phenomenal. We got to see a lot of the different aspects of the girls throughout this entire volume. We got to meet them and get to know them. We got to learn a lot about them. And it was this aspect of like queerness in the 90s, I believe, or 80s, without having it be so... It was very normalized, which is weird considering of the time, the setting that it was set in. The main like romance aspect of this graphic novel was absolutely cute. I adored it very, very much, and I cannot wait for the sequel to come out. I don't know when the sequel's coming out, but I will go ahead and pick it up when that happens. The next graphic novel that I read for Queer Lit Readathon was Kim and Kim Volume 1 by Magdalene Visaggio, Eva Cabrera, and Imogen Bini, who did the foreword. Benny. This is, from my understanding, Kim and Kim follow these two characters named Kim and Kim, and they are queer bounty hunters in space. I ended up giving this a 3 out of 5 stars. While I definitely did enjoy the plot and kind of how it functioned, my biggest problem with it was the art style. From the cover of the book, I was expecting it to be different, very different, for some reason. And then when I got into it, it was not that similar art style that was in the cover. It was a lot of bright colors, lots of like different facial expressions, which was really good. I liked that aspect, but it was still took some getting used to. And then I just could not really enjoy one of the Kim. I don't know why, I just couldn't get into her personality very much, and it was a very frustrating thing to read. But other than that, I enjoyed it, and I will be picking up the second volume once I probably pick up the other volumes of other graphic novels that I have started and need to continue on with. So the next book that I read for Queer Lit Readathon was You Asked for Perfect by Laura Silverman. I gave this a 4 out of 5. Okay, I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. I thought this was a really good and like really quick and easy read. It follows Ariel Stone, who is a Jewish bisexual boy. He gets straight A's, is meant for valedictorian, and then one day he fails a calculus test and has to find help in with his other friend Amir as a tutor. During this time, they start to fall in love, as all of these stories tend to progress, and he has to choose between liking Amir or continuing on this very kind of dangerous path of not giving himself a break during this hectic time in his senior year. Like I said, a 4 out of 5 stars. I definitely enjoyed it. Ariel is very reminiscent of all those AP students who take on way too much on their plate and don't really realize that they need to take a break until it's like really too late and like almost kind of detrimental to their development as a human being. I liked it for that aspect, and I also liked the fact that this was not a coming out story. This was not about Ariel realizing that he is bisexual and that he needs to figure out his life and like how to balance that on top of everything else. It's him being bisexual, having come out to his parents already, being accepted by his parents, and then just having this layer of liking this boy while going through this very stressful time in his life. Like I said, it was a very quick read. I don't have much to say other than that I enjoyed it and I recommend it, primarily because it wasn't that deep of a novel. There are themes in here that would, I think, appeal to very certain demographic, specifically those who are in high school, who are going through this very tough time of being a music student and having a really hard-ass music teacher, of going through AP classes and trying to balance things out, and then realizing that they had to give up some of the things that they liked or should have liked in this attempt of being this perfect student for colleges, for their parents, for their family, and try to meet expectations that they had primarily set for themselves. But like I said, I definitely enjoyed it. It was a very quick read. I definitely got a little emotional because, like I said, having been in that similar position, minus the valedictorian part because I am a bit of a dummy, I could relate on that aspect. But like I said, highly recommend, and I think it's just a very cute and quick read with a nice queer romance on the side. And finally, the last book that I read for Queer Lit Readathon was a reread for me, and that is The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I feel like this book has been popping up on my videos as of recently, but if you guys haven't seen any of my videos or haven't heard of The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, this follows Monique Grant, who is a down-on-her-luck journalist. A lot of bad things have happened in her life thus far, and now she has been asked by Evelyn Hugo, who has been a recluse in Hollywood, to write the article about her that details her life growing up from where she started out all the way to her 7 husbands and where she is now. As usual, 5 out of 5 stars. I think Evelyn is a deeply flawed character. She has a lot going for her and a lot of things that she has to sacrifice in the name of fame, in the name of accepting her dreams. And a lot of that is pushing down the identity that she should be versus the identity that everyone wants to be, as well as figuring out who she is. And then through this lens, Monique kind of learns more about herself. I really enjoyed it. I think it's a great book, one of Taylor Jenkins Reid's best stories. And as much as I would like to have faith in the CW adaptation, I don't. Hear me out. In terms of characterization and getting Freeform. In terms of getting characters and complex characters down, I think Freeform does a wonderful job of that. Wonderful job. Because I think the Shadowhunters spin-off or TV show adaptation was really good in terms of giving us the complexities of the characters that we grew up loving, which I think doesn't get enough knowledge of, as well as Pretty Little Liars and then the Fosters. And I think I haven't seen Party of 5 yet, but that looks really emotional. But in terms of plot and just giving us a solid, continuous plot that doesn't jump around 10 ways to Sunday, Freeform falls very, very flat. So that is where I'm going with, because I feel like we will get complex characters from this adaptation, and we will get similar to vibes that we are looking for. But in terms of trying to get the plot to work for that network, I feel like that's where the TV show is going to flop. And they also can't get Ana de Armas as Evelyn Hugo, who I think would be perfect because she's Cuban and she works blonde hair really well, and we've seen her as Marilyn Monroe in the screenshots. We'll see how that goes, but I love this book. One of my favorite books of all time. I will continue to reread it. My friend, I had been bugging her to read this for the longest time. So Ethel, if you watch this video, calling you out. And then she texts me saying she started the book. Brat read it in a single sitting. It was I think 5 a.m. her time when she finished, and 3 a.m. her time when she finished, and she was sobbing. Please pick up this book. I think that it's just a really good book. I love it so much. So moving on, out of Queer Lit Readathon, one of the books that I read for December was Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo. This is the first book in the Grishaverse trilogy. I am part of a read-along with my book Twitter friends, as you will hear me say probably for the rest of the next 6 months. Which isn't a bad thing, but you'll be hearing me say my TBRs and wrap-ups. I'm part of a read-along with my book Twitter pals. This follows Alina, who finds out she is a Grisha, which are these magical beings, and it's set in a Russian mythology-based world. She now has to figure out why she is Grisha, how to control her powers, and what this means for this overall world where the Darkling rules. I ended up giving this, I believe, a 3 out of 5 stars. I enjoyed the writing. The world building is what kind of kept me going with this. The Darkling also kept me going. The Darkling is a beautiful, majestic human being who I think deserves more than what he gets. But my biggest problem with this was that I just did not feel for the main characters aside from the Darkling. I feel like Alina and Mal are still very lost in terms of their development, and I would have liked a little bit more development on their part toward the end, which I feel like would have hooked myself as a reader a little bit more if I were reading this now. Alina screams really early's 2010 main character. She's clumsy, doesn't think she's beautiful, has a crush on the guy she's grown up with, and he doesn't see her in that light until she is pushed together with another potential love interest, and he gets jealous. At present, their development hinders on the fact that their relationship to each other is the one thing that defines them. which I'm not a fan of, and I feel like had that aspect been pulled out, or had we had seen maybe the love interest go missing for like the majority of the book until the climax, or we had not seen Alina's very blatant negativity, which is weird considering she lives in this very dark and almost like dystopian world with this fold and this bad stuff in there. You think she'd be a little less trusting, but she's too trusting, which is weird. So I will see how I feel about the second book. I already vlogged this one, so I will leave that vlog down below if you want to see it. But at present, my expectations for the second book and the remainder of the trilogy is kind of low, because I just don't see much development going on with Alina and Mal if they continue to be defined by each other. The next book that I read in the month of December is The Captain's Verses by Pablo Neruda. This is his translated work. It's a collection of his love stories, and he is a very well-known poet, a well-known Latinx poet, and an activist. I ended up giving this a 3 out of 5 stars. I enjoyed the aspect of this. I liked having the side-by-side of the original work and then the translation in English. My biggest issue with this is that I don't think this is the collection that I should have started off with for Pablo Neruda. I deeply enjoyed the aspects of the poems that I could get into, but literally the man mentions breasts every 2 seconds. And I don't know if it's just because it's his time or that's how his poetry works, but every time I see the word breast in a poem and it's just repeated on for the remainder of the poems, I'm just not intrigued by the idea. I get it, it's a love poem and you're sensual and all that stuff, but I feel like if I had heard the poem in Spanish, I would be more intrigued. But I don't think this was the poetry collection that I should have started out with in terms of Pablo Neruda. But I will continue to pick up his work and see if it's just maybe this one poem collection that I just did not like. Because it was just a lot of booby talk. And how his mouth, I don't even think I can say it without getting flagged. So there were good poems in here. I think I need to reread it and really enjoy it. But at present, I wasn't a fan of the amount of times he mentioned breasts in the poems. The next book that I read in the month of December is The Red Queen by Victoria Aveyard. This is I think this is a weird fantasy dystopian world. In this world, you are categorized by your blood. If you have silver blood, you are considered the elite. You have these magical powers that set you aside from the rest. Basically, you're like gods on earth. Whereas, if you have red blood, you are a peasant. They don't care much about you. Mare has red blood, and until one day where she is thrown into this world, she thinks of herself as a simple red blood. She doesn't think anything special about her, and then she manifests powers, and she's thrown into this world of political intrigue and romance and lots of potential death. I give this a 4 out of 5 stars. I enjoyed it. I think that the storyline is going somewhere. I was not expecting it to be a weird mix of the Selection and then the Hunger Games, and then throw in magic and science. I really enjoyed it in terms of the world building. Even the love triangle was done really well. I have high hopes for a Maven redemption arc in the story. I can't bring myself to choose between the two boys, which is weird because I always fall in line somewhere, and for right now my bisexual genes are going off and being sorry, you can't choose, even though they're not boy and girl or girl and girl. It's boy and boy. And normally I can choose with that one, so I don't know what's wrong with me at present. The thing that dinged me for this a lot was Mare. I don't know if it's because I had just come from, I think, reading Shadow and Bone before reading this book, but Mare she's not the most likable human out there. And I don't know if that's how it's supposed to be written. I think she's supposed to be really spunky and really sassy and really very Katniss Everdeen mix of during the Hunger Game, her first Hunger Games, and then Catching Fire. But there was a line where I just sometimes I'd like Mare and other times I just couldn't understand why she was saying or doing the things she did. She seemed very naive and not really understanding or coming at all to understand what's going on with her world. I don't know. That's the only thing that I had an issue with this book. I will be picking up the second book once I finish mourning the events of the first book, because wow, that was a roller coaster ride. Mare is my biggest issue right now. I feel like when she grows into herself more and becomes more of like that leader that we always see in YA fantasy novels, I'll start to enjoy her. But at present, she just seems really kind of like whiny, which is really shitty of me to say considering her life has literally been turned upside down and then thrown against the wall and then flipped over again. But aside from that, something about Mare just rubs me the wrong way. And I don't know if it's just because she's trying to navigate through this world and doesn't really know how to do it, or really cynical and kind of pessimistic, and my mind is like trying to relate to her, but it's also telling me this is basically you if you were thrown in this situation, and somehow I'm not a fan of literally seeing myself in this situation, which is weird, but either way, I'm excited to see what else happens. The next book that I read in the month of December was another reread for me, and that was for the Diviners Read Along, which I am very behind on. I haven't even started Layer of Dreams. This is the month where everyone reads like Before the Devil Breaks You. And that is The Diviners by Libba Bray. This is a 1920s historical fiction following this cast of characters who have these abilities that no one else necessarily has, and it assists them on finding this killer that has been loose. There's also some secret society in here and like very good representation, which I'm always down for a historical fiction novel. I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars, I believe, unless I changed it to a 4. One second. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed this book. The first book I think is one of my favorite books out of the 2 books of the series that I've read this far, but I have to reread Layer of Dreams to really figure that out. I like the characters. I like where they're starting out as in this first book. Typically, when we find characters in the first book, I find that we see them as like really bland, starting off, and then we build up their complexities as we go along, which is very fair and very like, that's how you write a character or introduce a character. But in this point, I feel like the characters, when you first meet them, are already pretty complex. We don't see a lot of their complexities until like probably like the middle of the book, toward the second book, but you can sense there that there's a lot of complexities there already. We don't need to have someone lay down the complexities for us. It's basically like foreshadowed that these characters are pretty complex beings with their own motivations and their own histories, and we don't need to be told that that is the case. We don't have to be like, the layering of their complexities is done very beautifully in my opinion, and it does really well. I can't wait to eventually reread the second book if I have time to pick it up this month, because last month I was supposed to do it, but I'm stupid and can't manage my time well, which seems to be a case for me when I give myself really long TBRs. And the last book that I read in the month of December is Queens of Ennis Lear by Tessa Gratton. This is a high fantasy retelling of King Lear, where King Lear splits up his kingdom between his 3 daughters, and an all-out war starts. Only this time there's magic. I gave this a 3 out of 5 stars. We do get some representation in here. I think we have a queer character, and then one of our main characters has been heavily implied to be asexual or aromantic or both. I would have liked the representation to be more overt. Like, I hate it when high fantasy novels just like don't want to say the words like transgender or non-binary or gender non-conforming or like gay, lesbian, bi, because the words didn't exist in this time frame, which is fair, but you can also say other things like they didn't conform to gender expectations, or they also sexually enjoyed men and women, or just something that overtly says that they are what they are without having to use the modern day terms for it. I'm not salty. Anyway, like I said, 3 out of 5 stars. I enjoyed the world building. I enjoyed some of the characters. I think like Regan and Gala were some of the more compelling characters. My biggest issue with this was pacing. It feels like there wasn't a lot of action, which is weird because a lot of stuff happens in King Lear, and same thing with Queens of Ennis Lear. It was a lot of like, we sped up, then we slowed down significantly. Then we sped up, then we slowed down significantly. And then all of a sudden things were happening way too quickly for me to comprehend what was going on. People were dead, someone had gotten stabbed, and then we fast forward to the end where someone was dead. And then the ending left me very unsatisfied. I just couldn't figure out what was going on in the ending, or what it meant, or if it had restored the balance in any way. I don't know. It's just, sometimes it feels like the author tried to be really adult with the descriptions and like everything, that it lost a lot of the concepts that it was trying to push forward, if that makes sense. Like in terms of like trying to restore the balance or like equal it out, it lost a lot of that in like the attempt of being super super poetic and super like very adult, because I know Tessa Gratton also writes in YA, but like it just feels like the amount of description and wording that like happened in an attempt to make this sound more adult than new adult, I lost a lot of the content that should have been given to me. You know, that makes sense? I mean, like, we have a lot of representation in here. We have, like I said, the potential one of the side characters is bisexual. We have a potential, that one is very overt. Like, we see this character flirt with men and women. Then we see, like, the potential Arrow Ace character, which I was also confused with because someone in reviews had said that they were Arrow Ace, but up until then I was thinking that maybe they had been on the transgender spectrum somehow. Nighttime editing Therese popping in. You'll see a daytime version in like 10 minutes. I just wanted to explain where I was coming from with the thing that I said about Queens of Ennis Lear. It's hard to explain because it doesn't feel like there was enough explanation in terms of this character's sexuality or their gender identity for me to really feel like it was representation. Yes, I am fully aware that like this character can be both trans and also Arrow Ace. I'm not saying that that is not a valid point, but there wasn't enough explanation, and it feels like it was just there. I don't know how to better explain it. Like, it didn't explain much, it didn't give us much description or really explanation as to what is going on, and I feel like there are a lot of implications to that description of me not being able to understand why this character may or may not be Arrow Ace or maybe on the trans spectrum. There just wasn't enough explanation for me to really count it, and it seemed like it could be misconstrued or defined in different ways because the explanation was so vague. And on top of that, I feel like had this character, like, you could definitely rewrite this book and remove that aspect of that character, or rewrite it and not have that description in there, and I feel like the character wouldn't have done anything to the story. So it doesn't feel like representation. It feels, I don't know, I can't count it as representation because it was so vague, and the implications there were like, she could be Arrow Ace, and every reviewer is like, she could be Arrow Ace, but I'm like, I don't want could be Arrow Ace. I want is Arrow Ace, is on the trans spectrum, and I don't want to sit here and have to read 10 different reviewers say the same exact thing because it was so vague and not at all explained. If that makes sense? When I read the scene the first time, I was like, oh, she's trans, or yeah, she is on the trans spectrum. That's cool. We'll probably explore that a little bit more in the book. But then I read through some of the reviews as I was trying to see if anyone else had seen it, and someone was like, this character is unconfirmed Arrow Ace, which I'm like, okay, one, this is a standalone. You can't have things unconfirmed. Unless there's a series where it'll be developed a little bit more, you have to explain everything. It can't be unconfirmed. Yeah, so that is where I was coming from that. I feel like it was too vague of that aspect, and I would have preferred, like I said, for things to have been said explicitly, because it doesn't feel, at least from that character and that specific scene, that I can accept that as unconfirmed potential Arrow Ace rep, and then having read it thinking she's on the trans spectrum. It's just too vague, too broad, and I did not like that part. I just want to give more of an explanation in case my wording in the previous clip sounded a little insulting or a little vague. I'm not saying that this character cannot be both trans and Arrow Ace, but there isn't really any definition. There's not an explanation. There's not a very stated scene where she explains her thoughts. So I don't know. That's just how I feel. Yeah. But who knows? And then all of the characters, all of like the main girls, the three sisters are mixed. They are half black, half white. Yes, I'm pretty sure. I know they're half black. I don't know what the father's side was. I'm assuming white because like King Lear. Other than that, I enjoyed it. I think that had the pacing gone a little differently and like the descriptions, like it feels like there was like stuff left to the imagination, but then nothing was left to the imagination. You know, that's where I was with it. It is editing Therese. my phone is on my tripod, and we're back to like one of my OG setups where I was filming with my phone. So since this wrap up was very chaotic, I stupidly filmed it with like 2 days left in December. Whenever I film my wrap ups, just a background, I wait until like the very last second, like before I like start thinking about my wrap up, so I can get the most out of my month and read as many books as I can. And I did not do that because holidays have completely fried my brain. So the very last book that I read for 2019 was actually one that I have been meaning to get to for a while, and I haven't been because I am terrible at picking up series and terrible at continuing with them. But I have a lot of friends on my book Twitter group chat / booktube Twitter group chat, however you want to call it, who are super huge fans of the series. So I finally picked up the copy that has been sitting on my shelves for a while, and that is Renegades by Marissa Meyer. This is the first book in the Renegades, I believe, trilogy. I haven't read any other books within the series, so I don't know if like Marissa Meyer is pulling a Cassie Clare, where it's like this is like the first trilogy, then there's gonna be a second trilogy. Because by the sounds of it, there was a huge plot twist at like the very last page of the series. So essentially, this follows a futuristic world where superheroes have kind of blossomed up after an age of turmoil, of complete destruction of their society. These superheroes are prodigies, or is what they are called, and they have not magical capabilities, but think more scientific abilities that they are born with or have developed through a rather traumatic experience or a weird experience in their lives. There are two different groups or factions of these prodigies. One are the Renegades, who are kind of currently ruling the world, so to speak. They have a council, they help save the world, keep it safe. Then you have the anarchists, who are trying to bring about a different world order and trying to kill off the council because they don't agree with the things that the council is currently saying and doing. We have two characters who are both within this council. Well, two characters on different opposing sides. In our main character, the POV that we follow is Nova, who is an anarchist. She is half Filipina, which is like, hi, thank you. And she has been an anarchist for most of her life after the tragic death of her family. I mean, it's not much of a spoiler, you read that in the beginning, so. And she infiltrates the Renegades to find out more about how to bring them down. There she meets Adrian, who is like the golden boy of the Renegades, and things ensue. I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars. There is a lot of hype around this, which I guess is why it took me so long to pick up this book. But the hype is very well deserved, I think. Marissa Meyer is a wonderful author, and she has created these complex characters in this very complex division of sides. We get to see Nova's point of view as to why she wants to take down the anarchists and see why this world isn't as clean cut as we would like. We also see Adrian's side of things as a renegade himself, and see why they both have very strong biases against the other side, and we see more complexities within like their individual like groups that get them to question both the sanctity of the thing that they're standing for, the thing that they're fighting for, but also kind of pushes them closer and closer to having them pick a side. I need to get the second book really badly. Like really badly. The plot twist was a little much for me. I think I ended the book and I texted my friend Andrew from Andrew Reads being like, so what do you mean about that plot twist? So I really need to pick up the second book. I don't know when that will be because I have quite a lot of books within my TBR, my physical TBR. I think I have nearing almost 40 now that I have to cut down. So my plan is hopefully to get to the second book like in the springtime. Maybe by then I will have knocked. This is why we don't drink energy drinks in the morning. The fizziness makes us burp. I'm hoping to get the second book probably in like the March, like the spring area, because I think by then I should be, May I think is the last month where I'll be editing my third draft. So I should have more time to read more books. But I need the second book really badly, but I also need to finish other series first. But I mean, I started this series, so it's on the list of series to finish. It's just a mess. I'm a mess. It's fine. There are a lot of books on my TBR. I'm very overwhelmed right now, which is a theme for 2020. Actually, the last tail leg of 2019 and 2020. Back to put together Therese, who is not half asleep, but it's still somehow in this video very half asleep and very chaotic. We're just gonna go with it because, you know what? We have to accept ourselves this new year. And I'm accepting that I am a horrible mess. But that is it for the books that I read in the month of December. I feel like I didn't read a ton of books, but then I look back and I'm like, wow, I read a lot. If you guys wanted to hear more of my thoughts on them, I'll be leaving all my Goodreads reviews down below for them, as well as any updated ones that I did for rereads and such. Until next time, hit like, subscribe. All my social media links will be down below if you want to catch me on other social media screaming about the books that I'm currently reading. I'm in the middle of Renegades right now, so you might see me scream about that somewhere. Until then, I hope you guys are having a wonderful week, and I hope you guys are enjoying the new year thus far. But yeah, and if not, we still have plenty of time to make it better. So I'll talk to you guys everywhere else. Bye!